What is it that makes a good backstory for a character in your TTRPG? If you're a DM or a GM and you've had backstories that come along either being like volumes thick or completely absent from the game, then you kind of understand where I'm coming from. Today, we're having a conversation about this. We're talking about what makes good backstory and what are some strategies for getting there. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance, your weekly Dungeons & Dragons and TTRPG podcast, where every week Rich, Garrett, and I pick up a subject around the culture of gaming and discuss it with you. So without further ado, sharpen up those daggers. We're going to get started right now. We're going to have to bring it in, right?
Yeah, Garrett, why don't you bring it in for us?
I'm not bringing it in.
Bring it the fuck in,
I'm not
dude.
bringing it in.
Just say something.
Nope.
Why is this so hard every week? We can't
Garrett,
figure
bring
out
it in, dude.
He brings it in.
And we just brought it in. That's our intro. Let's do it.
Clearly, this team has a lot of work to do in terms of figuring out how we get this podcast started. How's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to iCast Guidance. I'm here with Rich and Garrett. What's going on, people?
Another day in paradise, baby. Yes, we are in November. Woo woo.
Oh, yeah.
We got PAX Unplugged coming up, which is kind of exciting. I think it's really exciting.
I can't wait. It's going to be sick.
Yeah, we're within a month now. It's starting to it's feeling real. I'm getting excited.
Mm-hmm. Me too. The whole crew, with the exception of Atticus, we're all going to be down there. Addie's got other commitments, so they can't make it. But most of us will be there, which is going to be nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be like a MTV show with all of us in the house together for 3 days. You know, it's going to be crazy.
Is there going to be drama?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Great.
Maybe. Is this going to be like the Jersey Shore?
Yeah, we're going to record it. There's going to be cameras around the house, dude.
So that makes you what? No, I'm not making Jersey Shore references.
Oh, here we go.
Not making.
Here we go.
Not going to do it.
You know who I am.
So we got a good conversation coming up today.
I mean, the way you're dressed today.
Oh my God.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So if you guys are listening on the podcast, you can't see how Rich is dressed today, but you're kind of looking like Johnny Cash in The Situation Had a Baby.
Stop, bro. Don't hype me up like that. It's going to go in my head all day. All black.
Wow.
Yes. Looking mighty fine. So we got an interesting conversation today, which I'm looking forward to, about character backstory. Did some really good research on this. And I mean, we know a fair bit, obviously, because we've been playing for so long, but I wanted to kind of pause for a minute and do a listener comment from last week, if you guys are down with that. Last week, we had a comment from BSparky01 saying, this was the conversation we had about AI, if you remember correctly. This comment says, there are some folks out there that would say that if you're using a published adventure, you're not a good DM. For me, using a published adventure doesn't mean I get to turn my brain off. I tweak all kinds of things to suit my players' wants, or at least I hope so. Just like adventure modules, AI can be used as a tool to assist DMs. Where it crosses the line, or at least for me, is when people profit from what's generated by AI. If WOTC, Wizards of the Coast, or anyone else were to create an adventure fully created by AI and then try to sell that to me, I'd be pissed. Fair enough. And I kind of like the idea of bringing the pre-made module into this because, you know, one of the things I think we're worried about with the discussion around AI is that it does our job for us. But doesn't a module kind of do that on some level, if you think about it?
I hate the idea that using a module makes you a bad DM.
No, I do too.
That's crazy. It doesn't make sense to me because like all a module is you saying that like, hey, all right, maybe I really enjoy the story or the world that this is in. Or maybe I'll have time to create an entire one myself, you know, but I'm still going to change things and make it my own.
It's a roadmap.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, I'm not a DM, but just based on our commenters, you know, quote about just using it, but tweaking it. I mean,
yeah, it's a framework that you can kind of fill in the blanks on. And honestly, okay, so here's a perfect example. We played Strahd for over a year and a half. We played Strahd. And then Atticus was in a campaign where it was a Strahd campaign, and was telling me that the DM in that experience did things totally differently. And the experience was completely different. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yeah, that's the beauty of it, right? As we bring our own flavor to the experience.
Oh, for sure. That's the fun of it too, you know?
So I think AI has an opportunity. I mean, listen, again, I like to play both sides of this coin. I am not rah pro AI, and I am not fearfully hiding in the corner waiting for AI to kill me. I like to be in between. I like the conversation. So I feel like AI can really do something for us here in this regard if we know how to tweak what it gives us.
It's a tool, right? But also, like, if Wizards of the Coast try to sell me a full AI adventure, I'd probably burn it.
Well, I don't think, this is the thing too. And this was another listener comment at one point was talking about something. I remember getting back to them, and I was saying that there's a colleague of mine that's an English professor, and she was saying that it's becoming easier for her to spot AI generated content when she's reading it because it has a certain tone. I feel like an AI generated adventure would smell bad.
So I was just going to ask that because Rich, you made a comment that you would be like, if Wizards of the Coast made an AI, module, how would you know?
I would know.
Oh, you would know.
I mean, you could spot it a million miles away with the art it generates, the words they use. It's uninspired. It cherry picks from other things online. It's, not original.
Uninspired's a great word, actually. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
It lacks a kind of, I think there's still a human voice that we can sense.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the words have flourished, the human voice, is missing that flavor.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, BSparky01, thanks for that comment. And we appreciate you listening and adding to the conversation. That's awesome. We look forward to hearing your comments coming up for this story, this conversation we're going to have today.
We love comments. Please comment.
All right. So what do we got today? We're talking about backstory. We're talking about character backstory, which I know as a DM, coming from the DM side of it, I've got a lot to talk about here, but I know you both do too, right?
Yeah, for sure. Made a lot of characters in my day.
So what are some common mistakes, or what are some common issues or stumbling blocks you both feel like there are when it comes to creating character backstory? Like, what do you struggle with, first of all?
I mean, picking where to start, right? Because you always need a jumping off point. You always need, like you love to say, Todd, inspiration doesn't happen in a void, right? And you need to pick something to jump off of, and whether that's your class or your race or something. For me, choosing which one to jump off of is always the hardest part. Once I get going, I'm usually okay.
Yeah, gotcha. And I feel like you have a race, you have a class, you have an ancestry, whatever the words you want to apply to your sort of basic character building blocks. You have those things. You have a name. But then from there, it's like, okay, what do we do now? Like, where do we begin?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like when I'm going, it's like, all right, I really want to play a monk. So I'm going to start with like a monk, right? And then I'm going to think of what subclass I want to play, like that'll kind of fit that. And then I'm like, oh, okay, what race would it be? And then I just kind of go one by one, basing off that certain jumping off point.
I mean, Garrett, do you have any tools you use, or like, how do you kind of dig it? I mean, I know you kind of struggle sometimes with backstory.
I do. I struggle with backstory. I'm not going to say I'm not a creative person, but just coming up with those ideas, I struggle with them. I guess working with nothing. I think what Rich is saying, using your, whatever, your class or whatever to help fuel that. Tools, bringing it back to the AI, I have honestly used AI to create some backstories, and I've worked with it and I've actually enjoyed it. I personally like to play characters that I develop more of a forward story as we play than necessarily a backstory. That's just how I've always been,
Yeah. Do you write your backstory before you have all of like the character sheet filled out, or do you do that before?
I usually do it after.
Okay.
I come up with what I want to play. Like the character I'm playing right now, Branmorn in the campaign. I knew I wanted to play a warlock. It was, one class that I haven't played. Creating characters, I usually like to try and just try out something new every time. So I already had it planned out. And I actually had picked a certain elf class that had come from the Feywild, and I checked with DM, with Todd, if that was okay in our story. And then I did go to ChatGPT and I entered in there, create a backstory for, and then I put in, bunch of different, like a backstory for a Eladrin elf named whatever, and it started throwing stuff out at me, and then I kind of just build on that.
Yeah.
I'll take that out and I'll change stuff, or I'll change names, or I'll change locations to maybe fit the campaign. And then I work off of that. I don't know.
I mean, you got to admit that, building a backstory is obviously going to be a lot easier after your session 0. If you know where your campaign is taking place and you have kind of a basic groundwork that you can, you have to be able to relate to the present circumstances on some level. You can't be completely independent of what you're diving into. So I think that, maybe somebody's going to disagree with me here, but I feel like you got to have a session 0 in play before you can really dig into the backstory.
Oh, for sure. 100%. Because also, like, what kind of story are you trying to tell? What's the tone? You know what I mean? And you got to make sure your character fits the tone if you're all on the same board. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree on that. The session 0 is going to give you maybe a jumping off point, really, in our campaign right now. Most of our players are from locations on that map that you've created,
right?
Todd. So it's like, and then branching out from that.
I mean, there's also something to, like, we did with 10 Candles and stuff, where like creating that stuff together in the same room was really rewarding, really fun, really intertwined. And it was inspiring because you get things from other people.
Yeah, but that's also because that framework is carefully handled in that, you have some real basic parameters that lock everything down. 1, it's dark. 2, they're here. So it's sort of like there's not a lot of room to get outside of that sphere. Whereas in a homebrew open world, campaign, there's a lot of possibility. So that's one of the reasons why, as a DM, I take my characters and I say, all right, you're from this town. You're from this town. I not only want you to sort of work on building those towns, but work in how they play as far as the economy goes and political struggles go. And then how does your character sort of fit into that context?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, based on what you were saying off of the 10 Candles thing, how we came to the table and worked that together, that is just the design of that game. But the couple of times that we've played Daggerheart now.
Yeah.
And that is more of a story driven game. And we've always had a session 0, and we usually do character creation during that time, or
together,
some of the character creation. And I love working together with the other players at the table. But every scenario that we've done of Daggerheart, we know each other. The group is already together for the most part.
And there's the questions you ask each other beforehand that really get the ball rolling.
Yeah, and I really enjoy those.
Questions such as, like, what's a secret that you've only told this one character? Or what has this one character seen you do? Or something like that.
I like that back and forth, like fueling the, table. Just the interaction at the table between the players.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then, DMs or GMs, you can utilize certain tools in your session 0 or before to sort of help spur backstory for characters. So, you can do things that are sort of like, you can kind of say, all right, well, here's a timeline. Here's what's going on in the world now. And here's what's gone on 20 years ago. How could you possibly fit into that? So that's a building block that you could utilize. A way for someone to maybe explore their past. Because if you say, well, in this timeline, there is this conflict, there is this rise of a particular faction, there is a slow dampening of the source of magic over the last 10 years. How do you fit into that? And maybe you don't at all, but could you? What are some, I'm trying to think of, like, what are some goals that you could give to your players that are sort of saying, all right, you have this goal. How could that be connected to your backstory? And does that help you build a backstory?
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a direct tie to what's going to be happening in this campaign or this adventure. And, you can make that work.
But on the contrary, from some things I've seen online, right? If one of your characters is tied too deeply into the conflict of the story and the setting, they might fall into the main character kind of like role and whatnot. What do you think about that?
Well, let's kind of talk about that for a minute. The main character syndrome that we tend to have at tables. This is something that I think is worth its own podcast. But let's talk about that a little bit.
I think it's, especially when you're tied into the conflict of the story, I think it's super easy to fall into main character syndrome, because you could be tied to the events that are unfolding, making all the NPCs go towards you and making you have to speak and you get the power-ups, or I don't know, but it's super easy to fall into that trap.
Well, yeah. And I think that actually goes towards too much backstory detail, because as a GM, if I have 5 people at my table and one of them wrote a tome as far as their backstory goes, and the other 4 wrote or 2 of them wrote a paragraph, one of them wrote a sentence, and one of them wrote nothing. I'm looking at you, Garrett.
Oh. I
Shots
came
fired.
to the table with stuff this time.
You totally did. You totally did. I'm just giving. I'm just
Catching
giving
strays, man.
I am.
Wow.
But the point is that the heaviest one tends to win sometimes in terms of pressure on the GM to include that in their in the way they build their world. And so that all of a sudden now makes that character with that heavy backstory the focus. That's problematic because it tends to sort of mildly exclude the other players.
Well, do you feel obligated to do that because of the amount of time that they spent on their backstory? Or is it just because you have that framework to work with because they gave you so much?
Well, like you say, I don't like talk. I say you can't make in the void. Right. So if someone's giving me heavy backstory, well, that's filling in a little of my void and giving me like, oh, yeah, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
So Eric, for example, playing Thrud in our Atania campaign, comes to me with this amazing story of the history of the forges in, North Emberfell and how his family helped to sort of produce those. And then there's this whole connection to this special metal that can only be mined when the moons are in a certain alignment. And I'm like, oh, yeah. All right. We're adding some moons. We're doing all this stuff. Now that filled in my void. And I'm like, that backstory really helped shape my world. So I guess at some point I say, do I want detailed backstories so I as a GM can really build it out? Or is too much information just too much information?
Well, I think, how can you not reward someone putting in that much work when sometimes it feels like the DM is the only one putting in all that kind of work to the world and everything, right? You're not going to not include this person's hard work because some of the other people at the table were feeling maybe a little bit uninspired or a little bit lazier than that person, or,
Well, the parent and the old world teacher that I am wants to say, you worked hard. I'm going to reward you.
Yeah.
So your story is going to be kind of more central. And then at the same time, punish the slacker and say, you didn't do shit.
Yeah.
So for not doing anything, you're going to be a little less important in the campaign. But again, let's think about that for a minute, right? Somebody might just be going by a more simplistic rule of backstory creation.
Mm-hmm.
They shouldn't be punished for that necessarily.
No.
So,
and you walk a fine balance in our Atania campaign because you're like, all right, for this story arc, we're kind of focusing on this character and their kind of adventure. But you do promise different focus and different spotlight as time goes on to different characters.
Yeah, I like to end story arcs and begin new ones that focus on different characters at different times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that happens in TV shows and everything. That's a very normal and understanding way to kind of share the love.
Right. Because let's put it this way. Let's say we wanted to play this from the standpoint of the way Game of Thrones is filmed or Stormlight Archive is written, where it's like every chapter we're focused on a different story arc because we have the capacity to sort of digest that. That doesn't always play well with a game necessarily. You're a campaign of people that are all together in the same space at the same time. Hopefully, you can't break it up.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
No, and stuff that's happening might not pertain to the side characters. You might have that main focus on the one person, but there's other things happening that are growing the other characters too. So it's you can't really break it up like you were saying, Game of Thrones style, really.
Yeah.
Because we're creating a story together.
Although I got to say, a fantasy of mine would be where we have this world, this Atania world, and I've got your campaign, the 5 of you in that space, and you are all sort of on your own story arc. But then I play D&D with 3 other groups, all in the same world, all different characters. And they're on other story arcs, maybe on the other side of the continent. And maybe there's a time when you all cross paths, or
That'd be
something
sick.
your party did influences what another party encounters, right?
And you kind of never know who's going to come sit down at the table to play that day.
Exactly. And now all of a sudden you've got that really complicated story developing that's got multiple arcs in multiple places, like the Game of Thrones scenario. I want that. I don't have time to play that many games, but I will. I will.
One day.
Yeah.
To bring it back to the topic,
Yeah,
right?
please.
There's a certain, you talked about people going like the simplistic route, right? There are characters that are beloved, not because they have a lot of backstory, but because they bring a lot of personality to the table. What do you think about that, Todd?
Well, that's something that I was going to talk about. And I think
that's giving him the layup right there.
Yeah, you gave me the layup because you know what I'm thinking on
I had
this
to.
one.
It's a good point.
I mean, let's talk about Star Wars for a second here. And I found this in a Reddit post, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to pretend this is my own material. I was reading about this in a Reddit post and it made such sense. But one of the most beloved characters in Star Wars is Han Solo. Han Solo is a main character in this story, right? And what do we know? Let's pretend that the movie Solo was never made for a minute, okay?
Not hard. I do it every
Not
day.
hard. I know.
Wow.
Forgettable. Totally forgettable.
Wow.
But what do we know about Han Solo's backstory?
I mean, he owes money.
That's exactly what I said when he brought this up.
Yeah.
All you know is he owes money to Jabba.
So in Star Wars 4: A New Hope, we know that he owes Jabba the Hutt money. That's it. But we love this guy. Not because he's got some tragic backstory about how his parents were killed in some accident that forced him off to become a smuggler. No, he owes Jabba money. That's it. So what gives him the love? What makes him a lovable guy? Or a character, I should say. He's not a lovable guy, but he's a lovable character.
The way he navigates the world, the way he interacts with people, is a certain confidence and relatability.
Exactly. And so if your character in Dungeons and Dragons or whatever you're playing is more focused on this kind of personality that they possess now, currently in the game, and you have like just a couple of details about your past. You won your ship in a poker game. You owe some big, fat, ugly dude money. That can drive an entire campaign arc.
For sure. Yeah. And it's kind of like the way you make your characters in a sense. It kind of falls into that category.
I build it as I go along. Really.
Yeah.
I focus more on the forward is how I like to put it.
Yeah, man.
And then
I'm like in the future.
Yeah, I'm in the future, bro. Yeah. But no, I like to just kind of build as the story goes along, and then maybe, like you said, sprinkle a little bit in there. You don't know he won the ship in a poker game or whatever, but you figure that out.
Right.
So it's like you work those in as it goes along.
Right. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here, but we have a player in our Etania Dungeons and Dragons campaign who, I won't say who, has a very, very detailed and complex backstory. And we haven't even come close to it yet. And I feel terrible as a GM and that I haven't touched on it yet, but it just doesn't make sense in the context we're in. I've talked to this person a number of times about, the fact that we're lacking yet. And there's an understanding there that it will happen eventually. But this is a product. The reason this is happening is because there was too much too early, which is, Garrett, what you're saying, you kind of like to avoid.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree on that. And that's the thing. Like if I come to the table with like a million things, I don't know if I'm going to be upset that we haven't gotten to those things yet, but if you don't, maybe you'll feel that a little bit. Like, my story hasn't been brought into the campaign yet. We've been playing for a year or whatever. I don't know. That's just how I run my characters usually, is I just kind of come with a little and just, work through it.
Yeah. I get you.
That kind of reminds me of one other thing I want to add to that. And that is, there's this idea that if you as a player write a character backstory, you have pre-cemented a story. And that story, in order to be a story, needs to be told like somehow. But one of the things I argue for in terms of world building in general is that you're creating a framework. And that story is filled in by everybody over time. So the fact that there's this lingering pressure of this pre-existing story that needs to be told, I think actually kind of stagnates things a little bit. It means we got to force it into this. We got to shoehorn it in to this other thing. And that seems to me to kind of be antithetical to the spirit of story building.
Agreed. And if it's cemented beforehand, it's not as malleable to fit into the existing campaign as if you're kind of like doing it over time or revealing it over time.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so I think what we're going to do now is let's take a break really quickly. And when we come back from the break, I want to talk about a couple of methods to sort of now break us of that. How do we get out of that notion of these very heavily detailed things that we're going to shoehorn into? All right.
Beautiful.
All right, cool. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Goodbye.
Hey, esteemed listeners. Listen, if you like what we're up to today and you like the content that we produce here at Wither and Bloom Studios and what we talk about on iCast Guidance, today's request is going to be a little bit different. Sometimes I'm trying to get you to subscribe. Sometimes I'm trying to get you to go over to Patreon and support us. Today, I think I'm going to just ask you to share the word. Tell people that we're out there. Tell people that this podcast exists. Tell people that Wither and Bloom Studios are putting together a good thing. I see comments on our channel all the time that we're underrated, and we really want to grow. We want to talk to more people. We love getting into a bigger community, and I feel like you all can help us do that. So do me a favor this week. Tell a friend we're out there. See if you can get someone to listen. It'd be greatly appreciated. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, we're back from the break. And we said we were going to start talking about some ways in which we can get out of this trap of massive character backstories. And I was looking at something online about the notion of the 3-sentence backstory, obviously a simplified version of this. And I think, Rich, you were talking about something as well about a whole bunch of don'ts.
Yeah, I got a lot of don'ts.
Okay. So in 3-sentence backstory, there are basically 3 kind of general sentences that you utilize to do your backstory. And that is 1, where are you from? 2, what's one significant thing that happened to you in your life? And 3, what put you on the road to adventure? Those 3 sentences right there. Bam. That becomes that minimal framework. So with the Han Solo example we talked about earlier, it was sort of like, where are you from? Well, we don't even get that with Han. He kind of like moves about. We kind of know that already because he runs a ship that smuggles and he's back and forth. 2, what's a significant thing that happened to you? Well, I had to dump a load of cargo because I was being, chased, and now I owe Jabba money, right? And what put him on the road to adventure? We don't even know. Like we said, we were going to forget Solo. And the reason we can forget Solo as a movie and all of this is because we didn't need all that information about him. And frankly, it wasn't very exciting.
No. The mystique and the mystery is like kind of enticing.
I mean, the only thing in that I really enjoyed that I thought was fulfilling was how he found Chewbacca. And that happened in the first, the beginning of the film.
Well, let's not slander Donald Glover. He was the best part of that movie.
Okay.
As Lando.
Oh, yeah, that's true. He was good.
It's not horrible, but was it needed?
I got a couple of friends that rank Solo second to Rogue One.
I don't see that.
No, I don't either.
I saw a discussion like that the other day on the internet, and I was like, no.
Nope. Sorry. Solo doesn't even rank in my top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't even know. I don't care. We're not talking about Star Wars here.
Yeah, episode 3 is in the top 3 for sure.
Yeah, well, you're young, so
right,
we're gonna let that go. So let's talk about this 3-sentence backstory thing for a minute, because I like this, and I think it plays a little bit on the yes and principle that we talk about when it comes to improvisation and storytelling. That we kind of hear a thing, and the next response to that is yeah, and we add a thing, right, Rich? That's how this works.
Exactly. Yes. You just don't discredit the thing you heard before. And you try to, use it as a jumping off point.
Yeah. Which also helps to sort of support this notion of we don't create in a void. Well, now you have a thing. You're no longer in a void. So let's take that thing and move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think 3 simple questions is something that I could work with. Those are just easily answerable, like just questions, just to throw something out there. And I feel like that's something that I would, feed on, because then you just build it as you go.
And a GM, I think when they are preparing their group to start a new adventure, it's the type of thing where you can just say to your group, all right, listen, backstories. Here's the 3 questions I want you to answer. Nothing more, nothing less.
Mhm.
Bring that to the table. You want to do it?
Yeah, dude.
What are you, Deborah Ann Wall right now?
I kind of look, talk about legendary, introduction to Dungeons and Dragons. Deborah Ann Wall that was perfection.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So let's do it.
I know who that is.
Okay.
Let's try to make up a character backstory with 3 sentences.
Let's do it.
All right. All right. So we're going to start with the sentence of, all right, where are you from? And honestly, this doesn't have to be in our homebrew world. It doesn't have to be in the Forgotten Realms. It doesn't have to be in Eberron. It doesn't have to be in anywhere we might already know.
You start us off, Todd.
You want me to start us off?
Yeah.
Oh, I had an idea though.
Okay.
You start us off.
I'm I don't have a name for the location, but that'll come later maybe. But I'm from a very small farming town, and my father was a farmer, grandfather was a farmer, I'm a farmer. Maybe I'm getting a little tired of it, but it's a tiny little town, couple, just small community.
Love that.
It's a little farming community.
Okay.
And as a significant event in my life in this farming town, I have this recollection of the beginnings of a faction that sort of started to develop in the basements of some of the farmhouses where, there were some residents of that town that were unhappy with living situations. Not everybody had all the same amounts of land. Not everybody made all the same amounts of money. And so there was a small, quiet uprising that began. And then one night in a bar, when that uprising, a couple of the members of that uprising were having an argument, my father stepped in and put them all in their place. And that made him a real bitter enemy. And so our family was sort of ostracized from that town because of that, because we didn't agree with everything. We were better off. And then the last thing you would do, Rich, the thing you have to answer to this is what put you on the road to adventure?
Well, I think the ostracizing put me on the road to adventure. I think I'm possibly going out searching for a better home for my family and someone with ideals like us, a place where people with ideals like us can thrive.
I love that. There it is.
That was so simple.
We just created a backstory from nothing. And, you guys in podcast land who are listening to us can choose to believe us or not, but we didn't come to the table with that scripted. That was just, we made that up. I mean, I kind of want to go on Twitch live and just be like, all right, let's make some backstories and do it organically.
That sounds really fun.
Right? Imagine somebody in the chat room just types in 1-word prompt. Of course, I hate to think of what that 1-word prompt would be, given some of the chat rooms we've been live before. But
don't let us down.
No,
okay.
that could be fun. I like that.
That was cool.
I think that worked. And the nice thing about that is simple enough that number one, any map you come to, any homebrew world, that could fit, right? Number two, it offers a lot of possibility in terms of how this character's story arc can be filled in, not necessarily adhered to, which I think is really, brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing to avoid when making your character's backstory, right? I think you want to try to avoid the whole tragic backstory thing. I think it's played out. I think it's so easy. Let's be different.
I read quite a few comments on Reddit in doing a little research and stuff on this that it's just said stop with the tragic backstory. Everyone's done it, and there was I don't remember exactly the comment, but it said try to play someone that cares. It's so much harder to role play.
Oh, so good.
And play someone that actually cares that doesn't. If you come to the table like, yeah, tragic backstory, whatever, I don't care. That's easy. Like,
so, first of all, my knee-jerk reaction to that is I love that. Let's try to play someone that cares. But then my first thought is, cares about what? Because if I have 5 people at the table and I'm decided to take this on, I'm going to play the character that cares. And the other 4 people are playing tragic backstories. I don't want to seem like I don't have empathy or that I don't have, but I'm so tired of like listening to everybody's tragedy. It's such a cliche at this point. It's like, here are all my problems. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to be mentally ill as a character to be interesting. And, you know, a lot of these tragic backstories breed antisocial behaviors, and that's not fun for a group dynamic.
Right. Exactly. All right. So then the point here is that we're going to play somebody who cares, right? All right. So what do we care about? Because, you know, you're saying that breeding antisocial behavior, you know, as a character who might have some kind of antisocial behavior, you more often than not are probably not going to contribute to the narrative as much if you're antisocial. Like the game kind of requires you to have a level of engagement.
Yeah, for sure. And you can have some of those negative things going on upstairs, but like interacting with the party, being invested and still caring about things, you know, is all the difference, right? You don't have to be positive all the time, but you want to care. Right.
Well, and I think I'm all for characters having internal struggles, right? Because that's what gives, you know, an internal struggle is what gives a character depth. Mm-hmm. Right. So we're definitely not talking about necessarily just having a party of stupidly happy people that always engages. I mean, you have to be at odds with something inside yourself that's going to help you propel forward and maybe struggle over decision making. Right. That's hugely important. But what other things can we try and care about?
I mean, let's say like you're playing it as just someone who has a great family dynamic and maybe your family owns a business. And you're trying to find a second stream of income for your failing family business, and you go out doing adventuring things just to get that.
You're a sellsword.
Yeah, stuff like that. You know, bringing money back home for the fam.
Well, that's the reason you're out there in the food. Maybe that's your call to adventure.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and that would be interesting because, like, you would argue with the group over, like, all right, is this really worth it? Am I going to go fight a dragon just so you know we could pay our rent on time? Can I do something else?
Garrett, who is the character in The Way of Kings in the Stormlight Archive who leaves home because their family's running out of money? And Shallan. Yeah. She wants to steal that soul caster, right? So so
she has a backstory or essentially a motive to try and, you know, hook up with this one person to steal this object that she has.
Right. Which could save her family's legacy.
Yes. So she has something to care about. She has a family back home that's struggling and, you know, that's driving her motive in everything that she does.
Yeah. See, I like that. That's not the typical someone killed my dad and I'm going to, you know, get revenge.
Yeah. Or like my parents died and now I'm Batman, you know, seen it.
Play that, you know, we're D&D. We're all murder hobos. We just kill everyone and everything that comes across our path, you know, and this might be a very difficult group dynamic, but play that character that doesn't want to kill those people.
And let it be annoying. Like as a DM, just let it be annoying because it breeds conflict. You might be like, oh, we're getting nowhere. Why have we not done anything this session? But no, like the party's been arguing for an hour and it's hilarious.
Do you ever wonder if the reason why the tragic backstory is at the core of so many backstories is because of the Princess Bride? My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
It's badass.
Yeah, but it is. Maybe. And I love Mandy Patinkin's whole presence in that thing. But that sort of is like the, you know, you're out there trying to avenge the death of a close family member.
It's easy.
It is easy.
Yeah.
It's easy.
I mean, it's the one that we all go to for like a lot.
I mean, vengeance is cool. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's cool. You just got to spice it up a little bit with something, right? Like maybe they're not dead. Maybe they're captive, right? Or something.
Or even better, you're trying to track down the person who murdered your father and everybody thinks this is the typical cliched vengeance story. But when you finally find them, you hand them a bag of gold because that motherfucker needed to die.
Oh my God.
That's incredible. That's incredible, dude.
Wow.
I love that.
Wow.
Cut to our next campaign. I'm playing that character.
Wow. Wow.
That's so good. Yeah, you really flipping things on their head is a really exciting way to do a backstory.
Which is how we got to, rather than playing the tragic backstory, prepare or pretend to care or try to be that character that cares.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually really enjoyed that. Like I find those characters that are deeply invested in whatever it is that's their pursuit, their call to adventure has to do with helping someone in the end back home or helping someone that they, vowed to help, something along those lines.
Now, what about this? Like, early on in the campaigns, let's say like your characters are meeting for the first time. What if you tell them a fake backstory?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's actually really layered and complex and could be really interesting. And obviously there's a reason you're telling them that.
Yeah.
That
could be super interesting as well.
A lot of the times, I mean, this is going back to, I guess, being like that edgy guy that just like sits in the corner, and it's just a lot of my characters are like that. And I keep everything more internal until we've really gotten into the group dynamic. And then you start to learn a little bit more about me. So that's usually how I play my characters is you're not getting the whole story. Or maybe you get a false story. I like that idea.
That's really fun. Yeah.
I like that.
I think another big thing to avoid in building your backstory, even if it has to do with the 3 questions, is I cannot stand it as a GM. I cannot stand it when someone comes to me with a backstory that gives the character more power than they should have as a level 1 character. Here we are developing level 1 characters, and I've got a character that comes to the table with a whole history of fighting in the arena, or that they should already have racked up 10,000 experience points.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes no sense.
Or they're like the chosen one from prophecy, right? And they're delivered with all this promise and everything. And then the promise falls on you to deliver that. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, in a lot of ways, what you're doing there as a player is you're trying to dominate what might be the main plot of the story. You're coming in with an attempt to overthrow the main part of the game.
Well, you just brought up, like, I saw this comment and I just found it on my computer. It says, don't make your guy's backstory lend to him being a Billy badass. It says, remember, you're a level 1. In Lord of the Rings terms, you're not Aragorn, you're Frodo. Maybe you want to adventure, and maybe you can swing a sword a little bit, but you're just starting.
Yeah.
You're starting your story.
Yeah.
Don't make your backstory this crazy.
Unless you're starting from level 10.
Well, if
that's
you're starting
different.
from level 10. And then there was another, little sub on that comment was maybe you were a fighter in your prime, but maybe you're now 60 years old and you're a 60-year-old man. So you have that knowledge back there, but it's been so long.
And you've got to unlock it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'll do you one better. Or maybe you're Jaime Lannister and you just had your sword fighting hand cut off.
And you've got to start as a level 1 using the offhand. Oh, that's also really good. Yeah.
Crippled. Yeah.
Yeah. And now all of a sudden you have a reason through either milestone or through XP leveling. You have got a way to sort of apply a kind of methodology to, like what happens? Like, why did you gain that feat when you got to the next level? Well, because all of a sudden I've recalled now what it was like to do something with my offhand, or what it was like 60 years ago when I was, a trained, skilled fighter. It's back.
I like that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I think at the end of the day, the takeaway here for backstory is, number 1, simplify. Right. Definitely simplify. I love the 3-sentence backstory. I think that's gold because that creates a framework. 2, don't come to the table with, something that's going to overthrow the plot or something that's going to give you implied experience on some level. Right.
Yeah.
What else do we get from this?
I mean, we talked about it in the beginning, I think it helps to have a good session 0 interaction, knowing the world, knowing the place, and build off of that. Because I like what you say about the 3-question backstory, but I also like what we're doing in our campaign now, where we're building the world around us based on our backstories.
Yeah.
So maybe you do need a little bit more in that scenario, but I guess it depends.
Okay.
I have a question for us.
Yeah.
How do we feel, and what would you do with, let's say, a character who, after 10 or 20 sessions, realizes that they don't like their backstory? Is there any way to course correct that, or do you just start anew?
You kill them.
Wow.
Okay. All right. All right. Yeah, that's a great point, actually. Because I have a feeling that a lot of backstories are going to wind up in that boat because of the way the story's unfolding that you couldn't foresee.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. So what do you do there?
I think it depends on how much has been brought into the game at that point.
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent conversation to have with the DM or the GM.
There's got to be, there's maybe like amnesia, something, maybe like some magic manipulation that you didn't know was going on in your brain or something. I don't know. There's got to be ways to do it.
There's ways to do it, potentially.
Yeah, but don't fall into that trap that all bad movies utilize when they can't figure out a way out of their horrible storytelling and they have the character suddenly wake up and it was all a dream. Because that, I think, cheapens things a little bit. Do you ever see the movie Boxing Helena?
No.
Oh my God. Boxing Helena is a real, sort of obscure film. There was a couple of major actors in that, if I remember correctly. But basically, I haven't seen this in 20 years, but my God, let me try and put this together for you. The basic gist of it is there's a doctor. He's in love with a woman. He invites her to his house for a lavish cocktail party with a bunch of people. She leaves her purse behind. She comes back to get it. And she somehow gets hit by a car as she's leaving his house. He sees this. He drags her into the house. He nurses her back to health. And he's in love with her and he wants to keep her. But of course, once she gets nursed back to health, she wants to leave. And so when she tries to leave, he tries to tell her he loves her. She doesn't want anything to do with that. There's a struggle. He knocks her unconscious and he amputates both of her arms.
Holy.
So she can't hit him. So once she comes to from that and she recovers from that and there's another struggle, you guessed it, he amputates both of her legs.
No.
Oh my God.
And then he puts her in this box that sits atop his piano and he plays music for her. Now, this story unfolded relatively convincingly. And you're, of course, sitting there with your mouth hanging like, holy shit. He's got, he's amputated her arms and her legs. She's sitting on the piano. Go watch this movie. It's insane.
When was this made?
I'm going to say it was made in the early 90s.
Damn.
Yeah, early 90s. But then in the end, spoiler alert, pause the podcast right now if you don't want to know how this ends. It was all a dream.
That's so fucking
And you
funny.
kind of want to throw up and you kind of want to stand up, take your cocktail glass, your rocks glass that you're drinking your old fashioned from, and throw it right through your damn television set.
I'd be pissed.
Oh, I was pissed.
It's like the people who watch Lost, Well,
we're not going to go there.
all right, my bad.
Yeah, it's like,
Sore subject. We're not over it yet.
Exactly. All right. Well, listen, you guys, this has been a great conversation today. I have enjoyed this. And I have a feeling I want to play at, when we have some free time, I want to play at just making NPCs with 3 questions or making NPCs with just 5 questions, something like that. Let's do some rapid
I like the idea.
NPC
I
generation.
kind of like the idea of the live stream with, a little interaction from the chat.
You want to
Just
do
jumping
it?
off point.
You
That
want to
could
do
be
it?
fun. Yeah.
Anyway, you guys, listen, thank you so much for listening. Head on over to our YouTube channel where you can find us at Wither and Bloom Studios and definitely subscribe there. Comment on today's podcast and we will read your comments maybe on the next episode. Guys, this was great. Thanks for chatting.
Hell yeah.
All right.
All right. We'll see you all real soon. Take care. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to iCast Guidance. iCast Guidance is produced by Todd Lambrix, Garrett Brennan, and Rich Froman. We drop this podcast every week, and we are looking forward to having you hang out for more. Don't forget to head on over to Wither and Bloom Studios on YouTube, follow our channel, and definitely comment on what you see there. We will probably read those on this show. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to next time.